Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Hollywood Breaks. It's great to be with you on this Monday morning. Keith and I were processing over the weekend what it's like to go to work at Netflix on a Monday after the earnings reports come out on Friday. We're asking questions of really the life of living a Hollywood career and understanding like the comings and goings of decision making. So we like this and many other great questions like Comic-Con, building up an empire, and maybe possibly throwing it back down. That and many other questions here on this episode of Hollywood Breaks. One thing I'm constantly curious about is people's careers. I think it's interesting how people go from one job to the other, that you have to kind of, especially in Hollywood, stack a bunch of good things together in order to kind of make a career. And then the minute you have like one hit, or you can kind of like step over the line and kind of be in the zeitgeist. And then if you have one dive, you're right back to just being a normal person again.
You're only as good as your last movie, Tim. That's the advice.
Yeah, that's right. That's the saying. And there's something realistic about the Hollywood experience that way. So I think the people that do it well have like a good, strong strategy. And Tom Cruise is one I can respect, that he's basically, even when he did dumb stuff, didn't fall far enough that he can't still be Maverick or whatever, right? But when it comes to like most of us that get into Hollywood, I don't think we realize that at the very beginning. I think there's a lot of just like research or ideas, or we're very naive of like, I know I'm just going to be a famous actor, and then that's the way we kind of go about our Hollywood careers. Yep. But who do you know, when you're thinking about careers, who do you respect career-wise, of just people that have done a good job? And I'm going to guess that it's people more behind the scenes, people we don't know than we do know, because I think most people I respect are ones are like, oh, you know, people that have survived a studio system for 20 something years. That's a pretty good career.
Yeah. I would say just well, it's kind of off the top of my head, but I say Donna Langley at Universal, or I call her, she's Dame Donna Langley now. She just got appointed by the Queen, whatever that's called. I think she's had a really impressive career. She's run Universal really well over the last decade or so. It's been a very steady studio, very committed to theatrical experience. I'd also say Peter Chernin, who I worked with very briefly at Fox, was one of those guys who could walk into a room. He didn't say a lot, but when he spoke, everybody listened. And I always sort of respected that about him. He could even get Tom Rothman to just kind of stop talking, which is a feat in and of itself. So, I'd say those are probably the two that come to the top of mind for me. Again, just because they've had really great track records. Peter Chernin's not even really in the industry. He kind of is, but he's like doing his own thing now. And, I've really respected the track of his career and kind of how he started at small and worked his way up, and then eventually became Rupert Murdoch's number 2 at Fox. And then Donna, obviously running Universal when she started as a CE at New Line. So
yeah, that's pretty amazing. Yeah, because we often don't think about the people that are running the studios as a career-driven things. We think of directors and actors, and that's about as far as we go, right? People we see on stage at the Oscars are the ones that we might or might think about. But I think that there's a collection of things that have to make things, a collective of things you have to do in a career to make it happen. I think for me, like one person that's really impressive that is Jon Favreau. Like there's this really weird trajectory of Swingers to Elf, and then somehow he leverages Elf to get himself to Marvel and becoming really the creator of this like Marvel universe. Like he's at the beginning of this idea of like, hey, and he didn't work alone at it, but he put the pieces together to understand how the Marvel universe comes together, and clearly gave birth to even a new type of filmmaking and world. I say that because, Comic-Con happened over this weekend, and there's been another, 79 phases of the Marvel universe launched. And I almost wonder, like, who's going to be, when things lose their vision or they become, greater in scale than the original vision, I think it becomes very obvious. And this Marvel play for Disney is something of like, it's a cash cow. So making TV shows and comedy bits like Thor, Love and Thunder, and I saw the She-Hulk trailer. Like there's feel like they go into comedy with some of it. She-Hulk. I was
call it She-Hulk.
She-Hulk.
We're not doing Hawkeye yet. We're not doing the female Hawkeye.
No,
yet.
but we need a She-Hulk. No, She-Hulk. You're right. But there's like, there's just so much. These next phases of Marvel feel so strange compared to what the original vision is. And I wonder, like, what's going to come of this? How does this stack up to become the next thing in Hollywood?
Yeah, I mean, I had kind of trouble tracking it myself, and I'm still kind of piecing together. But so phase 4, which we're, I guess, currently in, will come to an end with Wakanda Forever, which is the next Black Panther movie, which they released a fantastic trailer. I encourage everyone to check it out. It's a great piece. That comes out, I think, in November, and that will officially close phase 4. Phase 5 will begin with the next Ant-Man movie, and that will run, I think, to the next Captain America movie, which is New World Order, and then phase 6 will start with they only announced three movies in phase 6. I think it was Fantastic Four, and then 2 new Avengers movies, Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars. And Secret Wars, I guess, will bring an end to phase 6 and the multiverse saga, as that's what they are calling it.
So it feels like phase 4, if I were to summarize, that's the introduction of the next people that are going to be doing it. So you have Black Widow and her sister. You have Ant-Man and I don't know what her name is. Bumblebee. Wasp.
Close.
Thor Love and Thunder finishes with his daughter. Well, not his actual daughter, but it's like, you haven't seen Love and Thunder yet?
I haven't seen it yet. Oh, jeez. Great.
Love and Thunder finishes with another person. I'm going to guess Wakanda Forever. We're going to see someone else taking over the claws. I feel like phase 4 is like, we have to transition from the original cast to a new cast of people that are going to keep it going.
Yeah, and there are a bunch of other shows, like She-Hulk's in there. There's a Daredevil show in there. There's
I think, did Doctor Strange bring on that?
He started the multiverse. I mean, it's from what I can gather,
he brought on a new sidekick.
He broke the multiverse, basically, right? That's the sort of I haven't finished Into the Multiverse yet, so I haven't finished it, but I think he broke it. And
you
Loki
haven't finished it yet?
Dude, come on.
Dude, just started
You always give me grief, Tim. I saw Top Gun before you. Back off. So
I've seen it twice.
Okay, good for you. Gold star for Tim for seeing Top Gun twice. See, now I lost my train of thought.
No, I was just saying that the sidekicks, it feels like phase 4 is.
So you have She-Hulk, you got Daredevil. There's going to be like a Thunder something Bolt movie, which I guess is all villains. I get the sense that Doctor Doom is going to play a heavy role in a lot of this, just from sort of doing a little bit of research and who the villains are and sort of the Secret Wars and Kang Dynasty comics in terms of the Avengers. So Doom's going to play a little bit. The guy who was the villain in Loki, the guy who was kind of holding the multiverse together, but was actually a villain, I think he's going to be a big part of it. He might be the next Thanos. There's a lot of moving parts. I'm personally excited because, as those of you who are regular readers of Founders Brew will know, I was a little concerned. I wrote about this, I think, last week, about how Marvel seems to be a little aimless in terms of where it's heading. And I encourage them to sort of go back to the mode of building towards something. So they're actually doing that. So I'm actually excited that they're
I'm glad they're reading your newsletter.
Yeah, man, I'm glad Kevin Feige's a subscriber. There are a lot of fishy emails in there in my subscriber list, so it very well could be Kevin Feige. You never know.
Yes.
So I'm happy to see that they're kind of building towards something, because that's really what makes the story so great. And there was a really great piece in the Wall Street Journal this weekend. And I'll look it up so everyone can look it up for those who read the Wall Street Journal, about how the story building and these infinite universes, the story universes they're building, sort of have really sort of touched a nerve with us, because it kind of goes all the way back to us, as human beings, and the culture is something that we sort of are gleaming to. I mean, I know there are a lot of people who complain that there's not a lot of originality anymore. There's no original stories, but they are building a very fascinating universe with all these characters, and I think that's exciting to watch personally.
Yeah, we'll see. I feel like it plays well to the Comic-Con audience. As you kind of list things off, there's this a part of me that just thinks like this is getting boring. Like I
Yeah.
think the TV shows to the films to, what I liked about Love and Thunder isn't necessarily like the revelation of more of the universe than just like the use of 80s soundtracks and some of the
Well, I
shorter
mean,
bit pieces
yeah,
that they did.
I mean, that's the other thing. They do have to start getting a little bit of the quality under control, because the problem with doing so, I mean, when you look at the first few 3 phases, they were all films. There was a little bit of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. from the ABC show, but it wasn't a lot. It was
Right.
very minor in terms of what you had to see the movies to really get a feel for what was happening and build up to, the Infinity Gauntlet series. But they've added so much more now with the shows on Disney Plus that it's almost impossible to be able to, wrangle it all to make sure it meets the quality standard they're used to. It's really, I'd call it kind of like the Pixar problem. What made Pixar so brilliant was that they didn't rush movies out. They took their time. It was like 3 years, they wouldn't rush a story. They'd work on it till it was good and it was right and had the right emotional beats. And then they started getting a little like, ooh, we've got all these franchises we got to build. And then all of a sudden they start churning out movies that don't fit the brand that they spent years building. And Marvel's at that inflection point, I feel like, where they can go one of 2 ways. They can either go the way of Pixar and start, chipping away at some of that brand equity they've built over the last 12 or 20 years or however long it's been, or they double down and they make sure that everything's, meeting the brand expectation. And I think that's kind of what Feige's next struggle is going to be, is sort of meeting that expectation, because he's spent countless dollar, money, time, whatever you want to call it, building a brand for Marvel and Marvel films that it pays off.
Marvel right now feels to me like Looney Tunes. Like I'm just watching another episode with like the same
Bugs.
Characters, but I have no idea how it's going to play itself out.
Yeah.
And then it's just like an episode, and then it doesn't have to relate to the next episode or the previous episode. In my mind, it just is like, okay, I'm just watching Bugs.
Yeah, I think they have to go. I think what the key is, they have to move beyond like the sort of the Marvel, the comic book formula of hero become unwilling hero with conflict, hero with angst, whatever it is. Some villain shows up, wants to destroy the world, hero has to fight, they save the world. Okay, little tidbit to what's coming next in the next movie. They kind of have to move beyond that. And I don't know the solution. I don't know the answer. I don't know the comic books well enough in and out to see if there are any storylines that are worth exploring. But I think they're going to have to sort of explore that a little bit more and not leave it so tied up in a nice, pretty bow at the end of every movie with a little post-credit sequence that sort of explains the nugget of the next movie. So I just, I think there's a lot of challenges.
Or they have to move on, like we were saying. Like you have to, in Hollywood, you have to have a strategy of things you stack together, and you have to know kind of like when this world is done. Or I mean,
listen, Kevin Feige, who I would probably, going back to our initial conversation, would add him to another list of an executive I admire, just from the fact the way he started and the way he's been able to find directors who really have appreciation for characters. I think something that DC often struggles with. But I think he has the cachet with Disney to say, listen, this isn't right. I don't feel good about this. I think a lot of this is them pushing him to feed the content beast. And obviously he wants to. I mean, he wants to tell these stories. He's a comic book nerd. He wants to tell a lot of these stories. But again, the problem is you're going to start chipping away at that brand equity. And what they did so brilliantly was they broadened a comic book movie to just beyond for those of you who remember the early aughts, the Ain't It Cool News crowd, who are going to go see the movie regardless of whether or not, they just like to complain about it. But he was able to broaden the audience beyond just that crowd, which is an achievement in of itself. But now he has to sustain it and continue to grow it if it's going to invest revenue for the parent company.
Yeah. I don't know.
So,
We'll see. I'm
yep.
just, I get like when you're feeding the Comic Con audience how you're playing games, and I
Mhm.
mean, the She-Hulk trailer seems fun. I don't know. It seemed fun. I can imagine being a crowd of people and the
Yeah.
opening scene with the
I
big hand
mean,
coming in and all that. Like that's a
it,
fun. It's a well
it
done
is.
trailer. I'm not
Yeah. And
pulling
I
up,
can
but I'm
tell
like,
you, having been in the audience, probably one of the fondest memories of my career thus far was when I was at Comic Con when we played the Deadpool trailer for the first time. That
sure.
was an absolute, and the crowd, we had to play it twice because everyone was just so into it and they loved it, and it was just a great, and it was a movie that they'd been clamoring for years, and Ryan Reynolds had been begging us to make it. So it was such it's a great environment to premiere material like that. But again, they're going to see it regardless. You go to Comic-Con because you want to get the press. And Marvel obviously, I think, won the press battle. They got pretty much all that. People are still talking about it. The Wakanda Forever trailer essentially broke the internet basically, and people have been raving about it ever since. So, Marvel wins when it comes to Comic-Con for sure. And, but other than that, they've got a lot more work to do. I mean, it really is going to be about, because yeah, She-Hulk's great, but it's going to be on Disney Plus. The challenging of popping streaming and getting eyeballs on streaming series that don't have like the cultural cachet of like an Obi-Wan are going to be a challenge for sure.
How badly would you have wanted to work on that Wakanda Forever trailer?
I would not have wanted to work on it because I
Oh,
know
really?
the headaches that working on movie trailers like that, the expectations, and I'm
I would
sure
have loved
John.
it.
I think John
Because when you
Nixon.
deliver, it's like the most amazing
Oh,
feeling in the world.
it's worth it 100%. But a headaches trying to get that thing over the finish line. It's
Of
never.
course.
I mean, watching the finished product play in a theater or in front of a crowd like that is always a
That's like the Super
rewarding.
Bowl of trailers moments. Like it's
Yeah,
like
it's
when,
moments like that. Yeah, it
yeah.
is. It absolutely is. I mean, playing in a crowd like in Hall H. I don't know if you've ever been to Hall H, Tim, but it's massive, and it's just filled with comic book geeks, and it's a phenomenal experience. And I in my time when I went, I'd always have fun there. I remember one time I was at I can't remember the name of the restaurant, but there's a restaurant, and it was myself, it was Cammy Sargent, and we were at the bar just having a drink, because I think it was the night before our presentation, because we always had to go in the night, because our tech check was always like 4 a.m. So we
Yeah,
always had to go
right.
early. So, and then we would just, hang out in San Diego for a day. And then the following day would be our panel. And we were there, and I was just sitting there, and I ordered a drink. I ordered drinks for Cammy and I. We're just kind of sitting there. And then I just happened to look over, and there's this bald, like cue ball guy sitting next to me. And I'm like, who the heck? And sure enough, it's James McAvoy.
Oh, yeah,
They
right.
had just flown in from Vancouver, where they were shooting. I think they were shooting Days of Future Past, and they just came. And then he showed up. Then the guy who plays Beast, Nick Holt, showed up, and I was just like, and I nudged Cammy, and I was like, and she just was like, it was like a double take. It's like, what? But that's the kind of thing that happens at Comic Con. It's just kind of random like that. But anyway,
Yeah, sure. I love it.
yeah.
Um, hey, I have to say, I saw Elvis over this weekend.
Oh,
Have you seen
nice.
Elvis yet?
I have not seen Elvis yet.
Oh man, oh man. Baz
Great.
Luhrmann, every transition, I don't think there's a cut or a fade in the movie at all. It's just like cinematic transitions from one scene to the next, to the next, to the next. So well done. It's interesting how he is telling stories, and he does it visually. Elvis is a perfect person for him to work on it because of the glitz and all the shiny stuff and all that theatrical dress and
Yeah.
dancing and all that stuff. It's just so perfect for him. But it's interesting how he told the story about Elvis in a way that it wasn't like Walk the Line or the Ray Charles movie, or like it wasn't like we didn't recall somebody in a biopic in the same way. He
Mm-hmm.
played more to the feelings, and the soundtrack he used was awesome. It wasn't all just period soundtrack. He was using contemporary sounds mixed in. He remixed some of the songs. Obviously, they performed some of the songs also just for the show. But absolutely, I just the evolution of filmmaking and the opportunity he's taking advantage of being digital film. I think he's doing an amazing job because he's going beyond the traditional old way of putting a film together where you basically have to do cuts and fades because that's all you could do in physical film. With digital, you can do so much more, especially within the 3D space. It's just amazing. I love the work that he did.
Yeah, I mean, he is definitely a fantastic visual filmmaker. I mean, I just remember, I mean, the only movie I worked on with him was Australia, which wasn't necessarily a box office success, but some of just the way he shot it, it was just had that old school Hollywood epic feel to it. And he is just such a visual filmmaker. And obviously Moulin Rouge is a fantastic movie. Like the originality in that film is just spectacular. So I imagine it probably applied similar to Elvis.
Oh, very much. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just the, you can tell that he's trying to ask new questions about like, what should filmmakers do? How should we portray things? It had like the story itself had almost a similar feel to like what Aaron Sorkin did with Steve Jobs, where in that case, I felt like Aaron Sorkin wrote the piece the way Shakespeare wrote about Caesar. Like, you had to like build scenes related to someone's life.
Yeah.
But really there's another story. And so he took, the Steve Jobs book and turned it into 5 major launches. But obviously, in real life, those things happen over time.
Yeah.
I think Boz did the same thing. He's like, I'm going to show the influence of people and time and moment. And there was this, there's this awesome play of like, how did Elvis become Elvis? Like what was actually happening that this one person and this one move changed everything? And there was a build up to the scene where he first got on stage and the Tom Hanks character, Colonel.
Yeah, I can't remember his name.
Yeah,
I know who you're talking about. The Colonel. They just called him the Colonel.
Colonel Tom something. Yeah. First sees him, and there's just like there's a tipping point, and then basically a wave he couldn't stop. So super great. I talk about people that their whole career is doing something. I feel like Baz Luhrmann is like, he figured out how filmmaking works and plays himself into it.
When they announced that he was directing it, I was like, yeah, that works. That movie's going to be, it's going to be a thing with him running the show. And it turned out that was correct. Yeah. So
grab your wife and go on a date, Keith. This is a good
the theaters aren't very close, but I can maybe convince her to do that. We'll see.
Come on, you have in-laws to watch the kids while you're in Maine.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure I do.
Hey, so Netflix reports came out last week.
Yeah.
A mixed bag or whatever, and then Gray Man.
Bag.
So I was thinking like, I wonder what it's like to go to work on Monday morning at Netflix after, like, last week was stressful and people were waiting and the response, you don't know what's going to happen. And then there's a weekend and you're looking for this big show opening weekend. And now that it's all done and you're showing up to work on a Monday after that moment, I wonder what that's like. Do you feel relieved? Do you feel like, okay, like now we're just going to, next quarter is coming soon enough?
Yeah, I mean, I've just from the reports I've read and the people I've talked to, I think a lot of the employees have kind of just moved on from it. Obviously, there's still a lot of angst because the report was a bit of a mixed bag. They did lose subscribers, but they didn't lose as many as they thought they were going to, as the street thought they were going to. So that, again, positive. But it's got to be, you got to have a little bit of angst, because there was a famous article that was written probably about 4 or 5 years ago by Netflix was profiled in the New York Times, and they wrote this article about the lobby of Netflix and how it was the one spot you could go where you could run into like Obama and Brad Pitt at the same time, because they're both there, because there's one lobby. It's just, you walk into the building at their big Hollywood complex and it's just the lobby, and that's where everyone sits and waits for whatever executive to come down and pick them up. So it was like the place to be in Hollywood. Now, obviously, that lobby is not as bustling as it once was.
Yeah.
But I think it's got to be a little challenging. I mean, when you go through, the one thing I would say is it seems like a lot of the theories have always been that the industry itself is sort of resistant to booms and busts of the economy. Like during the 08, 09 boom, bust, I would say, I was fortunate enough to be able to keep my job at Fox, and it didn't really affect us really. Even though there are a lot of people who were affected by it, and I was not. But I feel like this time around, with potentially another recession coming down the pike, inflation, it seems to be starting to hit a lot more than it has in the past. So I think there's a lot more anxiety, and there's a lot less places to go, especially if you leave Netflix, where they pay you an exorbitant amount of money and you can't get paid that somewhere else. I mean, I've heard stories of people who were petrified of losing their jobs because they knew that they went somewhere else, they wouldn't be able to afford their mortgage. Well, first of all, that's their fault for being irresponsible, buying a house that they wouldn't be able to
too
afford
bullish on your
unless they were at Netflix. But there's also the whole thing of their comp packages where they potentially give you the option to buy stock. And if you started a year ago and you were like, yeah, this stock just keeps going, you're probably like, I'm going to take half my salary in stock. Now look at it. It's in the toilet compared to where it was 2 years ago. So now you have to sit it out and wait till the stock starts to recover more. And, luckily after their earnings report last week, it didn't take another dive. So it kind of stayed pretty steady. So, I mean, I think there's just a lot more anxiety than there was in the past. So I think everyone's a little anxious. Now, are there people that feel protected? Probably. They probably feel like they're going to pass keeper's test till, the cows come home. But I think with the prospect of more layoffs, as well as the uneasiness on the industry as a whole, I think it's still a little like you're still a little anxious. And Netflix isn't like the place everyone wants to go anymore. I think there are a lot of people who are probably starting to look other places now.
Yeah, in the idea of like navigating your career to, what point is the right time to leave something like Netflix?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you're right. There's not necessarily a soft landing somewhere else. You have to kind of launch from Netflix into a more unknown trajectory in order to find the same kind of like buzz that you're used to, because Netflix obviously has been this, building enterprise, powerhouse for so many years that that idea of being unfamiliar, where the world's going to go, opposed to being so possibly feeling secure. If you've been there for 10 years or so, feeling very secure, like, oh, this isn't going anywhere. We're killing it. We're the monopoly on the planet that's doing this. But you're right. Like just after last week's earning, I almost wonder, like, do you feel relieved? Like, oh my gosh, I'm glad it's over. It's not as bad as everyone thought it was going to be. Our stock, it even seems like the stock went up a little bit, or at least
it didn't tank like it did at the last earnings report. Yeah,
I think at the peak at one point was almost $700 per share, and now it's hovering around $200. Yeah. So, how much further can it fall is going to be one of the questions you can ask. But if you ask that question, there's a lot. 200 times more.
$200.
Exactly. But I also wonder if there's like, do you just feel like you're back in the grind? Some days when I would walk into the office, I would feel like, oh, last week was so great. I could ride a wave for a while. And then you would hit Monday morning, you're like, no, that didn't last long at all. Just have to get back at it. And sometimes you just felt like, I just want to take a nap.
I mean, I think that goes to like the big difference in a lot of ways between streaming and theatrical. I heard a lot of people who said when they were working at some of the streamers, particularly Netflix, like it was just like you get your trailer out, you'd get your thumbnail out, boom, on to the next. It premieres on the service. There's no like, hey, good job, way to go. Then it's on to the next movie. Whereas like a theatrical experience, we go home Friday evening, fingers crossed. You're checking your email Saturday morning to see what Friday night looked like. And you usually have a good sense because they've released them now on Thursdays, so you have a sense of which directions. But
yeah,
you knew that come Monday, you kind of had a sense by Saturday afternoon what your Monday was going to be like. There was either going to be a hosannas in the hallway or everyone was going to be gloomy. And then you kind of
total
took
triage, like trying to rescue
you
it
took
for
a
week
day. 2. If it was a great movie and it went really well, you'd have a great celebration. That was one thing that Tom Rothman was really great at, was sort of the Monday mornings. If we made a certain amount, I think it was 60 million or was it 40 million? I can't remember. There was a number. He would bring in one of his like fancy old school 1967 Mustangs, this bright red Mustang. And he would bring it in if we opened a movie. And you knew when you walked in the morning, because the way I walked into the office, I could see all the cars, all the senior executives. You knew if I walked in and the red car was there, we're going to have a good day. But if it wasn't there, you knew it was going to be a dark day because, oh boy, the movie didn't open. He's going to be mad. It's going to be rough. So I think that's a big difference. You get a chance to celebrate, but in the streaming world, you don't. So for Netflix example, it's like they got Gray Man out the door, which was one of their bigger promotions, albeit I would argue not one of their greater ones, but they're just on to the next. So it's Monday morning at Netflix. They're probably, okay, what's our next movie? What's next? What's next? And I think that's the struggle when you come to streaming. And then, you're also dealing with the press obsessing about your stock price. So that doesn't help either. And the fact that there are rumblings that it's going to be more layoffs, which also doesn't ease your anxiety.
Yeah, I think it's going to be called, I think we should just change the name to Netflux. Just like
Tim.
Coming and going.
I think we have the title.
Might have a title there.
Yeah. Yep.
But you just feel like it's just turned into the comings of goings, and worrying about something else very different than making films or making an influence or the lobby. Yeah. Like the chatter isn't who's in the lobby anymore. It's can we survive a weekend of bad earnings and possibly a good hit. Do we have a Gray Man numbers?
I don't have the numbers. I haven't seen them yet. I'm sure they'll be out soonish.
It's Netflix's numbers, so that's the greatest movie.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are getting sick. And I know Sean McNulty is definitely calling BS on their numbers. I also call BS because it's the greatest movie ever made, and look how many hours we watched. What the heck does that even mean? Like, so I don't necessarily buy them, and I don't see a lot of people screaming and shouting because the reviews on the movie were not great. And so I don't think it's going to be the big hit that they had anticipated it to be, because they were banking this was going to launch a franchise.
Oh, really?
They were going to build a franchise, potential another movie around Chris Evans' character, because I guess he's like this villain in this movie, and they were going to potentially do another movie around him. I don't know if all that's just completely collapsed because of what just happened. I don't know. Like they're going to come out and they'll spin it however they want to spin it, and that's the thing that I think a lot of people are frustrated by Netflix. They don't have to live by the rules that most other studios have to live by when it comes to whether or not a movie's a hit. They can just kind of make it up.
Here's Forbes review: Netflix's Gray Man is better than the critics say. How is that even like a good review? Well, it's not as bad as everyone said it.
That's not as bad as everybody said it was.
So it says it's better than the critics say and worth your time. So there you go. There's a rave review. That's a franchise.
That's a rave if I've ever read one. Yeah. There's a review spot for you, Netflix.
I'm glad that the fog didn't roll in too bad, and you can keep your internet connection all that you needed to this week.
The chipmunk is working hard to keep the wheel spinning. So
keep it going,
the internet's working. Yeah, he gets a little freaked out when the fog rolls in. That's when he stops, and that's when my internet drops. But
exactly.
I have got him going now, so we're all in good shape.
keep bringing those peanuts.
Yeah.
All right, take your wife out on a date this week. Enjoy
I will. We'll go try to go see Elvis. I know. I got to see Elvis. I got to finish Doctor Strange. Yeah.
Dude, you can come on. You can watch Doctor Strange. You can watch 15 minutes a day and have it be done in a week. I try
not to focus too much on screen time when I'm up here, Tim. This is my reset time when I don't stare at a screen all the time. I spend my entire 9-10 months out of the year looking at a screen. I try to take a break every now and then.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, exactly.
But you should watch Elvis and finish Doctor Strange.
Okay, fair enough. I'll violate my rule just for you, Tim.
Yeah, that sounds good. Your kid's like, Dad used to love us, and now he's just... No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, later, my friend.
Yeah, we'll see you next week.
Okay.